Try to avoid jumping ahead in the learning plan though, because then you might miss some of the discussions and look at the concepts. This is one of those courses again that concepts are key, because how you're going to implement these concepts in the future are going to be radically different. So don't get stuck, don't get narrow-minded or tunnel vision on just, okay, I'm going to do these steps today and be done. Kind of listen to the concepts to begin with. So the things to cover, we're going to look at some of the existing groups. We'll look at of why they're used. We're going to look at creating them and managing them, and then, like I said, a whole bunch of specific activities later on. So to start off with, we can look at some existing groups. I'll just take a look at LTC, our classroom server. Under Active Directory users and computers, we have a whole list of objects built in. So when you create the server, so these are all in your servers as well. Built into the server, all kinds of groups, such as DHCP administrators, I don't know, domain admins, domain users. Here's a good one. Domain users. Here's a group. So anybody on the domain is automatically created and put into here. Groups are a leaf object in the organizational structure. They're not a container object. So as you can see, we can't put objects in the domain users group, but we can have what are called members. And so these would be called attributes. Attributes are anything that deals with users or groups or other containers, like addresses, phone numbers, who's my supervisor, what's my location, what's the description of this object. So like user descriptions or properties. Members of a group are also called an attribute. It's not a container object. The container objects are all these things over here that we built in our organization, where we have executive and IT and whatever. So we can put people in there. We don't put people in groups. We make people members of groups. So that's kind of a key distinction. But there's some that are built in, like we said, and then there's some that we create. So on the classroom server, we've created some. One of them that's actually called students. Guess what? Who the members are of this group? The students. So if I look at the members, it's all these people. And you're going to say, well, don't I already have a container that kind of represents all these students, like an organization unit called students? We do, but they do two completely different things. And if I own Microsoft, that's my phrase of the semester, this is something that I would certainly change. I come from a different networking background than the Microsoft Windows background, and what we used, you created organizational units, but then you can use it for file security. So you can say, these people in this container can use these files on that server. So like students can access the student folder. Not so the case in Windows. In the case of Windows, the organizational units do nothing other than organize a place to keep them and a way of implementing group policies. Get the kind of misnomer naming thing going on there. We have a group policy which don't apply to groups. They apply to organizational units. And then we have organizational units which don't do anything with the file system or any other kind of rights or security. So we end up having to do almost like a double management type thing going on here. We have to put the people in the right organizational unit so that they get the right policies and the right, what I can do with my hardware type stuff. But then I need to do a completely separate administration using groups, and groups then give us access to, mainly we use it for file access. You can also use it for rights delegation as well, and we'll talk about that later on. Here's another one, instructors. So here's an instructor container, but just because Gordy are in this container doesn't give us any access to any files. It's because we also are added as members to the instructors group that give us that access. And I'll jump way ahead and actually show what that kind of looks like. I'll do it this way. So once I get to the File Explorer, and It's coming. I have this data drive, and this is student folder. If I go to properties, and this is a separate topic, so you don't have to worry about like, what do we have to do here? Security, we can see students have the ability to read files in the students folder. So there's a folder, the students can read the files from that folder, and that's how you get that. This has nothing to do with the organizational unit. I could put you in that container, that organizational unit, and you won't have access to that file until I put you in a group. So it's double management. Likewise, it's kind of double management in that if I end up, say that, oh, Gordy's not logged in. We're going to make Gordy a student, okay? So it's just like, okay, I'm going to take Gordy, I'm going to move him over to students. Okay, now Gordy's a student, right? Doesn't have access to the instructor stuff anymore. Not true, because the rights are based on the instructor container, instructor group, and he's still a member there. So I'd have to remove Gordy from there, move Gordy over to students, go over to students, find the group called students, and then I would add Gordy into there. So again, it just seems redundant to me. You have to be in the container and the group to make things work properly in both worlds. So I really wish there was an undo button, but there's not.
Control Z.
So no Control Z in the world of G. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, Gordy, there we go. Remove him from that group. Find him. Boy, there's a lot of students. Uh-oh. Let's refresh the screen. Is he in the bottom? Oh, he went to the bottom. That's another thing that I have an issue with. It doesn't always alphabetize. If you put new things in there, it throws in the bottom. Not till you refresh does it alphabetize. So it can be tricky finding things. So I'll put them back in instructors. And then I'll just show you another way of adding people to groups is to right-click on a person you can add to a group as well. So you can do it from the group side. I want the group to add members, or I can be a user and I want to add, I want to become a member of a group. So this would be, I just have to type in the beginning part. It's instructors. So you have to move the person to the container and add them to the group. They can end up being nested as well, and I'll just show you that. Let me get rid of Server Manager and actually go to, well, I'll draw it on the whiteboard first. Make more sense. So, underneath operations, so actually I should do it this way. OU equal ops. There's an organization unit called ops. Underneath there is a first, and then a second, and a third. A third shift. So there's different containers, organizational units underneath here. There's a couple different ways that you could work with this. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's just we have to agree on how we're going to end up doing it for the class so we can keep moving along together. But there's no right or wrong way. So say I have, does anybody have an org chart offhand, like printed out?
No.
So under operations, we have Sarah. Let me do a different color so we can sort of see who's who. So we have Sarah, and then I'm just going to do a couple people. So first shift is Abigail, and second shift we have David, and third shift there's a Kayla in there, and so we have the different people on there. One way we could do this is that we want to be able to have a group for security purposes of everybody in operations. So we can make an ops, and I usually, I actually been getting rid of the dash, ops users. We used to always have to have single words, so you needed dashes, you don't need that anymore. So we have an ops users group, and then the members could be Sarah, Abigail, David, Kayla. That makes a ton of sense. Everybody in the department would be part of that group. Then we might have, maybe we want to have different groups for the first shift users. Maybe they might have some special rights. And, there would be more people over the first shift, but let's just put, Abigail in there. And then we have a second shift person, group, which would have David in it. And then the third shift group would have Kayla in it. And there's nothing wrong with this of having Kayla in two different groups, the ops users group and then the third shift group at all. So it just has it that way. I don't prefer this method overall though, because if Kayla moves to a different department, like say she moves to HR now, so I have an organization unit called HR, and now I have an HR group. I have to work with Kayla in multiple locations, so I'd have to get rid of her here, and get rid of her here, and then add her here. And again, it's not a big deal, but once you're having people in multiple groups kind of all over the place, it's kind of hard to keep track of them, especially if they're all kind of part of the same department. So another method of doing this is I wish that was bigger. Of basically making this the ops users group, and then we would have to include Sarah in here though, just in that group, instead of having individual groups that are kind of side by side. These would be like a nested group. So Kayla only exists in one spot. She's a third shift operations person, but then you make the entire group a member of the ops group. And it might make more sense if I show it on the organizational unit and actually show what it works with. But the advantage here again is I only have to remove Kayla once and put her into another container, rather than having to find all the different parts of the department that she may be part of. And again, there's no right or wrong in this. This is just one method of working with it. That's all. On the organizational side, I'll show you how to do this. So let's find my virtual machines, DC1. Hit that full screen, and then log in with controlled insert. Log in with my special password. And Server Manager will launch. I go to Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers. By the way, don't worry a whole lot about if you have a yellow exclamation mark on your network connection. That's just an ongoing issue with Windows servers. It's always been an issue. If I owned Microsoft, I would fix that. It says limited internet connectivity. It's not. If you go to the command prompt, I obviously can ping Google, which means it resolves the name to a number, and it can get out past my network and back in. So everything is working. I don't know why servers have such an issue with network connectivity icon things. Anyway, let's go to operations here. And here's Sarah. Here's my first shift. If I make a new group, making a new group is just like organizational units and users. There's 6 different ways of doing it. You can go to Actions, New, and then here's your group. I can right-click on the container I want to put them in and do a new group. I can right-click on the open area after I click on it and do new group. Otherwise, you have these 2 little people up there, which is another way of doing a new group. What you name them does not matter a whole lot because those are easily changed. So I'm just going to kind of write it out. First shift users. So these are the people in my first shift. One way we can add people to the group, like I showed you before, is go to the first shift and then click on the members tab, and then I can start adding members to it. So I can look up Abigail and check the name for Abigail, and so on. I can keep going through all that. The other way I can do it is by choosing the person. So if I choose Brianna, I have this members of tab. I'm a member of certain groups, and like we showed before, domain users, that's everybody. So you're automatically part of domain users just by being created. So I'm going to click add, and I want to be added to the first shift users. So that's another way of being added to a group. Another way of being added to a group is to right click and add to a group. And it's the same thing though. You just start typing it in, check the name, and click OK. And another way, which is you can do a bulk user, is just like we did before when we did bulk user configuration. You can select all of them, but you want to unselect using the control key to unselect the actual group. And you can right click on the entire department of add to group to first shift. Now, if they're already part of a group, it's not going to give you an error or anything. It's just going to say, oh, okay. So each person, I can look at Nicholas. He's a member of the first shift users group. I can look at Ethan, and he's a member of the first shift users group. I can go ahead and look at the first shift users, and I can see who my members are. It's super fast to add people. So let's go to second shift. I can make a new group called second shift users. And because it doesn't throw it alphabetically, it's a good thing at this point. So I can select, click, and then shift click the last object in all of those. Right click, add to a group. And now all those people are members of this second shift group.
And you can keep going down.
And I can go on the line to third shift. I think I'm missing somebody in second shift. I am. I am missing Joseph. Okay, so let's make a new user. Joseph. Oh, actually, you know what? Since David is already part of a group, I'm going to copy him. So now Joseph should be a member of the second shift users already. So that's kind of nice. So if they're like part of a bunch of groups, I don't have to go back and change them or whatever. So that's another way of doing it. Go to third shift, make a new group. Select everybody above, right click and click add, and then look up third shift. Now I'm going to operations. If I want to make an operations users group, new group called operation users. I can choose Sarah and add her to the group. And you again, you can go it either way. I can work on the operations side, and I can do members. Who are my members? And I can do things like first shift users. The other way I can do it is go to the second shift, and I also can do a right on the group. I can say add to another group. So either way, it's all linked together. If I'm a member of the group, then if you look at the group, I'll be on the members list. If you add me one way, I'm going to be connected the other way. So it's all linked. You can see each other, all the different directions. So if I go to third shift, add to group, operations. So now under operations, my operations users are going to consist of Sarah and all the other people. And there's pros and cons to this. I mean, you can certainly argue, it's like, well, that's more confusing because now I don't know that Kayla's actually here. I'd have to look through all these groups. You're right. So that's a downside of it. I like it just because it's an ease of administration, though, of saying, I only have to enter Kayla once. If I end up working with, Kayla's account and I need to change where she's going to go, I only have to do it one place here. I remove her from third shift, and I might add her to HR. Now, I don't have an HR group, so it's not going to work. But that's how I could do it right from there. So, the question was, if I move people between groups, can I do it while they're working? Absolutely. It is possible, though, that they would lose access to the file that they're currently working on. Potentially. I mean, it depends where it is. So if I'm in operations and I'm looking at an operations schedule, and then you move me to HR, you would actually lose access to it in the middle of editing it. So what would happen, it'd be stored locally on your computer in memory. You just wouldn't be able to write it back. So you would end up basically have to save it to your local hard drive. But then you go look out your drive and it's just like, boy, my whole operations folder disappeared, but suddenly there's a human resources folder there. So it's usually a coordinated attempt. So it's like, okay, you're moving departments. Why don't you log off, give us an hour to make sure everything's straight, then log back on. But it certainly does happen real live at that moment. You'll lose whatever rights that old group had that you're removed from, and you'll gain brand new rights right on the fly. A couple other just basic things with groups here. So that's kind of the concept of how groups work, how you can nest them, the pros and cons about having it, whether the users are listed which way or the other. If I look at the operations users, I can rename these groups pretty easily. I can just right click and do a rename, or you can just click on it and then click on it again like you would renaming a file. So instead of, boy, operations is so long, I'm going to make it ops users. And when you do that, it does bring up a rename dialog box. We really do not care about the pre-Windows 2000. If you're a network administrator someplace that's running pre-Windows 2000, that'd be your first goal of fixing. You shouldn't be running anything pre-2000. But if you wanted to just keep things consistent, go ahead and rename it. It does not matter because there's nothing that we'll be using that's going to be pre-2000. But that's it. That's how you rename it. Super, super easy. Moving them around, I can take ops and I can move it over to accounting. It's just a container for it. I thought I put under accounting. I have no idea where it went. So we're going to find ops. Make sure we choose the entire directory. Ops users, find, and we'll just move it back. I don't know why it's not showing up. We'll move it back though. So it's hidden. Okay, not how the demo is supposed to go. So let's just do a search again.
Is it like a folder where you can make it hidden?
No.
No? Okay. So I don't see why you would need to. But
I don't see why I need to either. So I'm just going to delete it because you can't create it if it already exists. So let's just try this again. Make a new group called operations users. Let's go ahead and move it again to accounting. Okay, that's where it is. Good, good. And I can move it back to operations. I have not experienced that before, of a hidden whatever. So new opportunities every day. So so renaming them is super easy. Moving them is really easy. And by the way, this was the whole point of showing you the first time. By moving to accounting doesn't change anything. The members are still, well, I deleted all the members when I recreated them, but the members are still the same and they're going to have access to the same folders. Organizationally, you're not going to be looking for the operations group under accounting. That's just not going to make a lot of sense.
Could you just store them all
You can. That is another option, another very legitimate thing. And sometimes underneath an organization, they will put a new organizational unit called groups. And they'll put all the groups under there. Oh, wrong container, that's why. Oh, wait a second. How'd that get clicked on? Oh, I must have clicked on that by mistake. That's why. Okay. Operations. There we go. So you could take all your groups and put them in the groups container so you would see them all. That's very legitimate. Most of the time what I've seen, though, is that they kind of work with the department. Usually the group is where the people usually are. Okay. So deleting groups. There's nothing secure about them. So there's no secret little handshake that you have to, like a whole maze that you have to traverse to delete. It's just simply right click and delete. Because it's not going to destroy anybody. So if I look under third shift users, I have all these people. And if I delete third shift users, it doesn't delete the people. It's just the group. Unlike I go over to the third shift organizational unit and I delete it, these people get deleted. So that's why you have that extra step for organizational units, because it is destructive. You could wipe out an entire department just by right clicking. Groups, yeah, you can mess up the rights. Suddenly nobody in operations has access to their files anymore. That you can fix. Deleting all the users in operations, much bigger deal. So renaming, deleting, adding other groups, subgroups from the user, bulking add. So that is actually pretty much the overview. The rest of the learning plan is just going to have you go through some specific activities. So you get to practice with your cats and dogs that we had last time. We're going to create different groups. Oh, I did want to talk about one other thing. Often we'll also use groups to identify people's positions. So in this case, we have the king of the jungle. It's not a group. It really is an individual person. But it's a way of identifying that person. Later on, we're going to see that in your exercises here, where we're going to use groups to identify specific people's roles. Now, I'm having you do this for a purpose. One is to practice with creating groups and putting people in groups. But the second thing is there might be a need that a sales manager would have more access to the files or different files than the rest of the sales department. The HR manager probably has access to more stuff than the typical HR worker does as well. The network administrator, we're going to talk about delegating rights. The network administrator should have more network access than a typical IT person as well, and so forth. So these are the groups that you should be making, and these are the members of those groups. So we work with just a practice one with cats and dogs, and then we have working with our users within our departments. And then we have, working with a role. I call them a role because that's what I'm used to calling them. So managers, administrators, whatever it's going to be is usually identified that way. What's so nice about using roles for rights is that, well, let's see. So thinking of an organization, why would the HR manager, who is what? Who is Alexis? Does Alexis have access to a higher level of HR information because she's Alexis or because she's the HR manager? Because she's the HR manager. And so what's really nice is that, let me just go ahead and do this. So I'm going to make a new group called HR manager. And I'm going to make Alexis a member of the HR manager. So I'm creating an HR manager group. I'm adding Alexis to the HR manager group. And so now looking at HR manager members, there's Alexis. You would then be giving rights to the HR manager group to give all those special rights later on, and we don't have those yet because we don't have a file system yet. In fact, we don't have a volume yet. That's coming up. Future weeks. It's kind of like the cliffhanger, like, oh, I can't wait till next week. In fact, it's not next week. It's like 2 weeks or something. But anyway, we're getting there. I have to look at the list. Maybe it is next week. Okay, continuing on. So what's really nice, though, is like, okay, Alexis is gone and Emma needs to fill in. You can't, not have a boss for, 6 months or whatever.
Try me.
So I can go to HR Manager, I go to Properties, and I can just, add Emma. And I can take Alexis and remove her from the list. And that's all I need to do. And so I don't have to go onto Emma's account and make sure that she is this axis and that over there. And then I have to go into Alexis and remove this and that and the other thing. You do all the rights and security based on the group object. And then you put people in and you take people out. You put people in, you take people out. Super, super, super easy. So that Emma leaves and then Anthony takes over. Go to Properties, Members, remove Emma, add Anthony. And now, like you said, does the person do they have to be logged out? No. Instantly, Anthony would have all of his old rights plus all the new rights now. So all of a sudden, like, extra folders would show up. And it's like, wow, it's like magic. And now Alexis comes back from her lengthy vacation. Anthony's enjoying his access to all kinds of extra stuff. And it suddenly disappears. And it all goes away. Poof. Like that.
Just like
The power of a network administrator. So looking at the learning plan again, so you'll be working with some of that. Oh, not that one, this one. So you'll be having managers. The president would have special rights. Then in addition, you'll be making a managers group, because these are all managers, a managers group that then contains all the managers. So then again, that'd be a nested type group. So the HR manager is going to get access to specific HR things. IS manager is going to get specific access to HR manager stuff. But then all the managers in the company would have access to something special later on, and we're going to work through that. Completely legitimate, though. You could take all these people and add them to the group individually. Again, I don't prefer that method, but there are legitimate reasons for doing it. To keep on track and ease for grading and ease for, like, as we talk about things, just kind of go along with this, though, and follow the plan that's kind of laid out. You can certainly get it to work in other ways. That is not a one-way plan. It just is easier to answer questions, though, if things come up along the way. Questions or comments? But that's an excellent question. Where would you put managers then? And that is completely up to you. So some people have put it under executive, since they kind of think it's an executive role. So you have president up there and all the managers. You could put it right underneath GOPA. You can create an organizational unit called groups. Other people put it under users because these are other ones that are built in. So you could put it in pretty much any of those locations. I try to avoid the users container just because there's so much junk in there, and it's kind of hard to find yours when you need it. I have used it, and there's nothing wrong with using it. You just have to know where it is when you're trying to manage it.